A ringing phone at 2 a.m. in an empty diner means nothing but trouble. But when a terrified 6-year-old boy whispers that bad men are breaking down his door, hanging up isn't an option, especially when his father is the most feared syndicate boss in the city. The neon sign outside the Rusty Spoon flickered with a persistent, annoying buzz, casting a harsh crimson glow across the rain-slicked pavement of Chicago's Lower West Side. Aurora May wiped down the Formica counter for the third time, the acidic scent of industrial cleaner doing little to mask the lingering aroma of stale coffee and fryer grease. It was 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. The diner was completely empty, and Aurora was running purely on the fumes of cheap caffeine and the desperate need to pay her overdue rent on Dearborn Street. She was just untying her stained apron when she heard it. Brrrt. Brrrt. It wasn't the diner's heavy rotary phone by the register. This sound was sharp, synthetic, and muffled. Aurora paused, the rag dripping soapy water onto her scuffed sneakers. She followed the sound to booth 4, tucked away in the darkest corner of the restaurant. Sliding into the cracked vinyl seat, she found the source, a heavy, matte black satellite phone, resting innocuous and out of place next to the napkin dispenser. It didn't look like an ordinary smartphone. It was encased in military-grade rubber, devoid of a screen save for a small glowing green display that read Secure Com 02, Incoming. Aurora hesitated. A man in a tailored charcoal suit had sat in this booth about an hour ago. He had ordered a black coffee, kept his collar pulled up, and spent 20 minutes anxiously scanning the parking lot before abruptly leaving a $50 bill on the table and rushing out into the storm. He must have left the device behind. Brrrt. Against her better judgment, Aurora reached out. Her fingers brushed the cold rubber. She pressed the flashing green button and lifted the heavy device to her ear. "Hello?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For a second, there was only the sound of heavy, panicked breathing. Then a tiny, trembling voice broke through the static. "Paulie. Paulie, are you there?" Aurora frowned, her heart doing a strange flutter. The voice belonged to a child, no older than 6 or 7. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Aurora replied softly. "There's no Paulie here. You have the wrong number." "No, no, no." The boy's voice hitched into a stifled sob. "Paulie said to press the red button if the bad men came. I pressed it. Please tell my dad they're inside." A cold dread pooled in Aurora's stomach. The exhaustion completely evaporated from her system. Hey, it's okay. My name is Aurora. What's your name?" "Lucien," the boy stuttered. "I'm hiding in the dark box, like Dad showed me. But it's locked from the outside and I hear them breaking the glass." "Lucien, listen to me very carefully," Aurora said, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the phone. "Where are you? What's your address?" "The big house. On the lake. In Lake Forest." "I don't know the numbers. Dad never lets me walk by the front gate." Lake Forest, the ultra-wealthy enclave north of the city. What was a child doing alone in a panic room with a military-grade satellite phone? "Okay, Lucien. I need you to stay completely quiet. Don't make a sound. I'm going to call the police, okay? They're going to come help you." "No!" Lucien whisper shouted, his panic escalating. "No police. Dad said never the police. They work for the Russos. If the Russos find me, they'll shoot me." Aurora froze. The Russos. Anyone who lived in Chicago and occasionally glanced at a newspaper knew that name. The Russo family was a prominent, hyper-violent crime syndicate that had been waging a bloody turf war across the city for the past 8 months. If the Russos were breaking into this house, this wasn't a burglary. This was a hit. Suddenly, a massive, echoing crash transmitted through the phone's speaker, followed by the heavy thud of boots on hardwood floors. "Find the kid," a rough, muffled voice barked in the background of Lucian's end. "Tear the walls down if you have to. Dominic isn't here to protect the little brat tonight." "Aurora," Lucian whimpered, the sound so fragile it broke her heart. "I'm scared. I'm right here, Lucian. I'm not hanging up," Aurora promised, sliding down into the booth so she was hidden from the front windows. She pulled her personal cell phone from her pocket with her free hand. She didn't care what the boy's father had said about the police. A child was about to be murdered. She dialed 911. It rang twice before a dispatcher answered. 911. "What is your emergency?" "Yes, please. I'm on another line with a little boy. His home in Lake Forest is being broken into by armed men. He's trapped." "Okay, Mom, calm down. Do you have an exact address?" "He doesn't know it. He says it's a large estate on the lake. His name is Lucien." The men breaking in, they mentioned a man named Dominic. There was a dead, chilling silence on the line. The faint clicking of a keyboard stopped abruptly. "Mom," the dispatcher's voice completely changed, dropping its professional cadence and turning ice cold. "What did you say the father's name was?" "Dominic," Aurora repeated, desperation bleeding into her tone. "They're hunting the boy. You need to send SWAT. Send everyone." "There are no units available in that sector, Mom. I suggest you hang up the phone and forget this call." Click. Aurora stared at her cell phone screen in absolute disbelief. The dial tone hummed mockingly in her ear. Lucian wasn't just being paranoid. The fix was in. The police weren't coming. "Aurora," Lucian whispered. "They're in the hallway. They have guns." "I'm here, Lucian. I'm thinking, she breathed, her mind racing. Who was Dominic? And how did she save a boy miles away from a cartel of killers? Before she could form a plan, the diner's front door chime violently jingled. Aurora's head snapped up. The heavy glass door, which she had deadbolted 20 minutes ago, swung wide open. The lock had been completely shattered, the brass casing lying fractured on the checkered linoleum floor. A man stood in the doorway. He was incredibly tall, with broad shoulders stretching the fabric of a ruined, bespoke Italian suit. Rainwater dripped from his dark, swept-back hair, mixing with the crimson blood that heavily saturated the left shoulder of his jacket. In his right hand, gripped with terrifying, casual ease, was a suppressed Heckler and Koch USP. Aurora stopped breathing. The man stepped into the diner, his dress shoes leaving bloody, watery footprints on the floor. His eyes, a striking, glacial blue, swept the empty room with predatory precision before locking directly onto the top of Aurora's head, just barely visible over the back of booth 4. He raised the gun, aiming it squarely at the booth. "Slide out," the man commanded. His voice was a low, gravelly baritone that vibrated with dangerous authority. "Slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them. Aurora's entire body trembled as she slowly stood up, raising her free hand in the air. Her other hand remained clamped tightly around the satellite phone, pressed hard against her ear. She couldn't let Lucian hear the terror in her own voice. I don't have any money," Aurora stammered, stepping out of the booth into the dim aisle. "The register is empty." The man didn't even glance at the cash register. His glacial eyes remained fixed on Aurora, specifically on the heavy black device pressed to her ear. A muscle feathered in his jaw. Despite the severe gunshot wound leaking dark blood down his sleeve, he showed no signs of pain, only a terrifying, tightly coiled rage. "That phone," the man said, taking a slow, deliberate step forward. "How did you get it?" "A man left it," Aurora said quickly, backing away until her spine hit the edge of the front counter. "A man in a suit. He was here an hour ago." "Poorly," the man muttered, a flash of grim recognition crossing his face. "He was supposed to be watching the perimeter. If he dropped the comms..." He took another step toward Aurora, the barrel of the gun remaining terrifyingly steady. "Who is on the other end of that line?" Aurora hesitated. If this man was one of the Russos, handing over the phone meant handing over Lucian's location in the house. She lifted her chin, finding a microscopic shred of courage. "I'm not telling you." The man's eyes narrowed. He crossed the distance between them in 2 massive strides, closing in before Aurora could even flinch. The scent of copper, rainwater, and expensive cologne washed over her. He didn't point the gun at her head. Instead, he reached out with his left hand and snatched the heavy phone from her grip. Aurora gasped, reaching for it. "Give it back. He's scared." The man froze, the phone halfway to his ear. He pressed the device to his face. "Lucienne," he said, his voice instantly shedding its lethal edge, replaced by a desperate, rough tenderness that completely shocked Aurora. "Lucienne, Cucciolo, is that you?" A loud, tearful gasp echoed from the phone speaker, loud enough for Aurora to hear. "Dad! Dad! They're here! The bad men are in the house!" Aurora's knees nearly gave out. Dad. This heavily armed, bleeding man standing in her diner was Dominic, the father. "Listen to me, Lucienne," Dominic said, his eyes locking onto Aurora's as he spoke into the device. "Are you in the vault?" "Yes," the boy cried. "But they're outside the door. They have a machine that makes loud noises. They have a blowtorch," Dominic muttered under his breath, his glacial eyes darkening into a storm. He spoke back into the phone. "The vault is rated for thermite, Lucian. It will hold them for exactly 12 minutes. I am coming. Do you understand me? I am coming right now. Do not make a sound." "The lady," Lucienne whispered. The lady on the phone was nice. She stayed with me. Dominic's gaze shifted, raking over Aurora's pale face and stained waitress uniform. The hostility in his posture dialed back by a fraction of a degree. "I know, Lucian. I'm with her now. Keep the radio on, but be perfectly silent." Dominic lowered the phone, slipping it into his ruined jacket pocket. He finally holstered the weapon at his waist, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his gunshot wound. "You called the police," he stated. It wasn't a question. "I tried," Aurora said, her voice shaking. "The dispatcher. She hung up on me when I mentioned your name. She said there were no units available." Dominic let out a dark, humorless laugh. "The 18th district is on the Russo payroll. I wouldn't trust them to write a parking ticket, let alone respond to a hit at my estate." He leaned against the counter, suddenly looking impossibly tired. "My name is Dominic Moretti." Aurora's breath hitched. Moretti, the head of the Chicago Camorra, the man the local news anchors referred to in hushed, terrified tones as the architect for the meticulous, ruthless way he dismantled his rivals. She was standing 2 feet away from the most dangerous man in the Midwest. "You're bleeding," Aurora pointed out, stating the incredibly obvious because her brain couldn't process anything else. "An ambush on Michigan Avenue 40 minutes ago," Dominic replied coldly, pressing a hand to his shoulder. "They hit my motorcade. They wanted me dead before they went after my son. They failed." He looked up at the diner's clock. 2:21 a.m. "I am out of time, and I am out of vehicles. My car took a radiator hit, and I had to abandon it 3 blocks from here. I tracked Paulie's comms signal to this location, hoping to find my backup team." He looked around the empty diner. "Instead, I found you." "Paulie left," Aurora said, defensive. "He looked panicked and just ran. Paulie is likely dead in an alley by now. The Russos are thorough." Dominic pushed himself off the counter, gritting his teeth against the pain. "Do you have a car?" Aurora blinked. "A car. I drive a 2012 Honda Civic. It's parked in the back." "Keys. Now." Dominic extended his bloody hand. "No," Aurora blurted out. The word hung in the air, surprising them both. Dominic's hand slowly dropped. The dangerous, lethal aura returned in an instant. "Excuse me? You're bleeding out," Aurora said, pointing at the puddle forming by his expensive shoes. "Your left arm is useless. You can barely stand, let alone drive a manual transmission 25 miles north in a thunderstorm while trying to shoot back at cartel hitmen." She swallowed hard, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. "I know back roads. I know how to avoid the highway cameras. I'll drive you." Dominic stared at her as if she had just grown a second head. For a terrifying moment, Aurora thought he might just shoot her and take the keys anyway. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, broken only by the hum of the neon sign outside. "What is your name?" he finally asked. "Aurora." "Aurora," Dominic repeated, testing the syllables. "If you do this, you cross a line you can never step back over. The men in my house will not care that you are just a waitress. They will kill you without a second thought. They're going to kill a 6-year-old boy in 12 minutes if we don't leave right now," Aurora fired back, grabbing her worn denim jacket from beneath the counter. She didn't know where this sudden surge of adrenaline and defiance came from. Maybe it was the memory of Lucien's terrified voice, or maybe she was just too exhausted to care about the danger anymore. She tossed him a clean dish towel. "Press that to your shoulder. The car is in the alley." A faint, deeply buried glimmer of respect sparked in Dominic Moretti's cold eyes. He took the towel and pressed it to his wound. "Lead the way, Aurora." The 2012 Honda Civic's engine whined in violent protest as Aurora slammed the accelerator to the floor. The car's worn tires hydroplaned across the slick asphalt of Lower Wacker Drive, the subterranean labyrinth of concrete pillars and service roads that ran beneath the heart of Chicago. Above them, the city slept, completely oblivious to the desperate, bloody race happening in its underground arteries. Dominic sat in the passenger seat, his massive frame dwarfing the compact interior. The dish towel Aurora had given him was already soaked through, a heavy crimson stain spreading across his lap. He had the satellite phone pressed to his ear, his voice a low, soothing murmur as he spoke to his son in Italian, keeping the terrified boy grounded. "Take the ramp up to Lakeshore Drive," Dominic ordered, his breathing growing noticeably shallower. "Skip the Kennedy Expressway. The Russos have spotters on the overpasses. We need to cut north through Evanston and take Sheridan Road straight into Lake Forest. Sheridan is winding and dangerous in this rain." Aurora shot back, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. She expertly downshifted, throwing the Civic around a sharp, blind curve. "But it's fast. Hold on." Dominic braced his good arm against the dashboard as the car surged up the ramp, bursting out from the subterranean tunnels and onto the rain-lashed expanse of Lakeshore Drive. The dark, churning waters of Lake Michigan roared to their right. "Why are you doing this?" Dominic asked suddenly, his glacial blue eyes studying her illuminated profile in the dashboard lights. "You are risking your life for a syndicate boss you met 10 minutes ago." Aurora kept her eyes on the road, weaving past a slow-moving semi-truck. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for Lucian. I grew up in the foster system, Mr. Moretti. I know exactly what it sounds like when a child realizes that the monsters are real and no one is coming to save them. I won't let him feel that." Dominic fell silent, processing the raw honesty in her voice. In his world of calculated betrayals, offshore accounts, and ruthless ambition, this waitress in a stained uniform possessed a fierce, incorruptible loyalty that money couldn't buy. The estate's perimeter was supposed to be secured by ex-Constelli's private military contractors, Dominic said, his voice hardening as he checked the magazine of his Heckler & Koch. State-of-the-art thermal imaging, seismic sensors, for the Russos to bypass all of it without triggering a single alarm. They had help from the inside. Aurora's stomach plummeted. A mole, someone who knows the security rotation, someone who knows the exact layout of the panic room, Dominic confirmed, a terrifying wrath vibrating beneath his words. The 25-mile drive felt like a lifetime, but Aurora pushed the little Honda beyond its limits. They tore through the wealthy northern suburbs, the sprawling mansions hidden behind high iron gates and dense, ancient trees. "Turn here," Dominic commanded. "Take the gravel service road. It leads to the rear botanical gardens." Aurora yanked the wheel, plunging the car down a pitch-black, tree-lined path. The Civic bounced violently over deep ruts before skidding to a halt near a towering, 10-foot-high limestone wall. The wrought iron service gate had been blown completely off its hinges, the twisted metal resting in the mud. They were too late to prevent the breach. "Stay in the car," Dominic ordered, unbuckling his seatbelt with his good hand. He shoved the heavy satellite phone into her lap. "Keep talking to him. If I don't come back in 10 minutes, put the car in reverse drive to the FBI field office in the Loop and ask for Special Agent Thomas Ridge. Only him. Dominic, wait, Aurora started, but the Mafia boss was already out of the car, blending instantly into the rain and the shadows of the massive estate. Aurora looked down at the green glowing screen of the phone. The static hissed. "Lucienne," she whispered. "Aurora." The boy's voice was barely a squeak. "It's getting hot. The metal door is turning red in the middle." The blowtorch. They were melting through the titanium locking mechanism. Aurora looked at the dark, imposing silhouette of the Moretti mansion. She thought about staying in the car. She thought about the very real possibility of dying on the wet grass of a billionaire's lawn. Then she looked at the heavy iron tire iron resting in the passenger footwell of her Civic. She wasn't going to sit in the dark and listen to a child die. Grabbing the tire iron, Aurora slipped out of the car and sprinted into the freezing rain, following the trail of bloody footprints Dominic had left behind. The rear entrance to the mansion was a scene of absolute carnage. The heavy mahogany doors had been splintered by a breaching charge. Two men in tactical black gear lay motionless on the imported Italian marble floor, dispatched with silent, lethal precision by Dominic. Aurora crept through the grand foyer, her soaked sneakers squeaking faintly on the marble. The house was cavernous, filled with priceless art and antique furniture, but it felt like a tomb. She followed the acrid smell of burning metal and ozone. She rounded the corner into the east wing and froze, pressing her back against a silk-lined wall. At the end of the long hallway was the entrance to the panic room. Three men wearing tactical vests with the Russo family crest were clustered around the heavy steel door. One of them was operating a massive thermal lance, showering the hallway in blinding blue-white sparks as it cut through the vault's hinges. Standing a few feet away from the hitmen, directing them with calm, chilling authority, was a man in a sharp, tailored suit. "Hurry it up," the man snapped, checking a gold Rolex on his wrist. "Dominic's motorcade was hit an hour ago. We need the kid secured as leverage before the rest of the Camorra realizes their boss is dead." Suddenly, a shadow detached itself from a marble pillar behind the hitmen. Dominic moved with impossible speed for a man who had lost half his blood volume. He didn't yell. He didn't hesitate. He simply raised his suppressed pistol and fired twice. Pfft, pfft. The two men guarding the blowtorch operator dropped to the floor instantly. The man holding the thermal lance whipped around in panic. But Dominic was already there, driving the butt of his pistol into the man's temple with a sickening crunch. The operator collapsed, the thermal lance clattering to the floor, its flames sputtering out. The man in the tailored suit spun around, drawing a revolver, his eyes widening in absolute horror as he saw Dominic standing there, a vengeful ghost bathed in blood and shadows. "Angelo," Dominic said, his voice echoing down the hallway like a death sentence. Aurora gasped silently. Angelo, Dominic's trusted consigliere, the man who had managed the family's finances for a decade. "The mole." "Dominic," Angelo stammered, his hand shaking violently as he aimed the revolver at his boss. You were supposed to be dead on Michigan Avenue. "You sold my son to the Russos," Dominic said, taking a slow, deliberate step forward, completely ignoring the gun pointed at his chest. For what? A larger cut of the shipping docks? The family needed new leadership. Angelo screamed, backing up against the scorch-marked vault door. You were getting soft, Dominic, hiding behind your legitimate businesses. The Russos promised peace if we handed over the territory and the boy as collateral. You touch my son, Dominic whispered, raising his weapon. And there is no peace in this life or the next. Angelo's finger tightened on the trigger. Clang! A heavy piece of solid iron slammed into the back of Angelo's knees. Aurora had crept up behind him, swinging her tire iron with every ounce of strength she had. Angelo shrieked in pain, his legs buckling under him. His revolver fired wildly into the ceiling, showering plaster down on them. Before Angelo could recover, Dominic closed the distance. He didn't waste a bullet. He delivered a brutal, merciless strike to the back of the traitor's head, rendering him instantly unconscious. The hallway went dead silent, save for the heavy, ragged breathing of the Mafia boss and the waitress. Dominic stared at Aurora, his chest heaving, his blue eyes wide with shock. He looked at the tire iron in her trembling hands, then down at the unconscious traitor at his feet. I told you to stay in the car, he said, though there was no anger in his voice, only profound disbelief. I'm a terrible listener, Aurora choked out, dropping the iron bar. It hit the marble with a heavy clatter. She pointed a shaky finger at the steel door. Open it. Dominic stepped over Angelo's body and approached the keypad. The metal was blisteringly hot from the thermal lance, but the locking mechanism had miraculously held. He typed in a 12-digit code. The heavy bolts disengaged with a loud hydraulic hiss, and the massive door swung open. Inside the small, reinforced room, huddled under a tactical desk, was a small boy with messy dark hair and wide, terrified brown eyes. He was clutching a teddy bear in one hand and the charging dock for the satellite phone in the other. Lucien, Dominic choked out, dropping to his knees on the scorched floor, careless of his bleeding shoulder. Dad. Lucien scrambled out from under the desk and threw himself into his father's arms. Dominic buried his face in his son's hair, his broad shoulders shaking with the sheer force of his relief. For a long moment, the ruthless syndicate boss disappeared, replaced entirely by a terrified, grateful father. Aurora stood in the doorway, a profound sense of exhaustion finally washing over her. She watched them, a sad, soft smile touching her lips. She had done it. She had actually done it. After a minute, Lucien pulled back from his father's chest. He looked past Dominic's shoulder, his brown eyes locking onto Aurora. He noticed her stained uniform and the grease smudges on her cheek. "Are you Aurora?" he asked, his voice still trembling. Aurora knelt down to his eye level. "Yeah, sweetheart. I'm Aurora." Lucien let go of his father, ran over, and wrapped his small arms tightly around Aurora's neck. "You promised you wouldn't hang up," he whispered into her collar. "You didn't." Aurora hugged him back, tears finally spilling over her eyelashes, mixing with the rain and sweat on her face. "I promised." Dominic slowly stood up, grimacing as his injuries caught up to him. He pulled a fresh cell phone from Angelo's unconscious pocket, dialing a number to summon his loyal cleanup crew and the syndicate's private trauma surgeon. But as he held the phone to his ear, his eyes remained entirely fixed on Aurora. the way she held his son, the way she had risked everything, her life, her safety, her meager existence, for a family she didn't even know. "Aurora," Dominic said, his deep voice commanding the room, cutting through the adrenaline and the trauma. She looked up at him, still holding Lucienne. "You can never go back to that diner," Dominic stated, a terrifyingly possessive edge bleeding into his tone. "The Russos will find out who drove me tonight. They will hunt you." "I know," Aurora whispered, the reality of her situation suddenly crashing down on her. She had nothing. No money, no protection, and now, a target on her back. Dominic walked over to her, his shadow falling over her small frame. He reached out with his uninjured hand, gently brushing a wet strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was startlingly tender from a man whose hands were stained with blood. "You are under my protection now, Aurora," the architect of the Chicago Camorra vowed, his glacial eyes burning with a fierce, unbreakable promise. "Whatever you want, whatever you need, it is yours. You saved my heart tonight, and I protect what is mine." As the distant wail of syndicate sirens began to echo through the Lake Forest estate, Aurora looked up at the ruthless Mafia boss, realizing that answering that ringing phone had ended her old life forever, and started a dangerous, consuming new one. If this heart-pounding Mafia romance kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button. Who do you think will betray Dominic next? And how will Aurora survive this dangerous new world? Drop your theories in the comments below. Don't forget to share this story with your friends and subscribe to the channel for more thrilling, dark romance sagas every single week. See you in the next video.